We arrived in Perth and it was a difficult situation. What to do? Is that, you know, is Prabhupada going to stay in a motel, a hotel, with meat eaters, you know, or at Ganesha's house, which is really unsuitable? So we rented a house for 6 months for Prabhupada to stay in for 10 days. Just something you do, you know, for your beloved Guru. I'd also met Prabhupada previously, but this is one of the highlights. So Prabhupada arrived and we just got the house together. You could imagine we had to borrow beds, borrow sheets, borrow towels, you know, cooking utensils, buy food. So Prabhupada arrived and he really liked the break there. He was with 5 devotees and we were just in a house. And so Shruti Kitty cooked a lovely feast, you know, and on the first day we served Prabhupada lunch and then we had lunch. And of course we had been on the road for about 3 or 4 days organising. We hadn't slept and we hadn't eaten properly. So when we had sumptuous prasad cooked with love for Prabhupada, we passed out. I seem to have passed out more than anybody else. So I'm in the middle of the day, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm totally passed out on the floor. Didn't know who I was, where I was. And then there was a bell ringing, and it was ringing and ringing. Everyone else woke up and they left me there. So then I woke up and I was excited because I was in the same house as Srila Prabhupada, and I looked to my side and I could see feet and I could see a cane. And I looked up and I looked up and I looked up and there was Prabhupada looking down at me. And he said simply, "Irresponsible prince. Devotees work hard and you simply eat and sleep. Krishna sends and you exploit. The irresponsible prince enjoys all the facility and sleeps all day. This is just unacceptable." He said to me, "You can leave this movement, you can go. This movement doesn't need you. It doesn't need devotees like you. It doesn't need irresponsible prince." And he left and went to his room. And so I sat on the floor for a few minutes wondering what to do. And so I went into Prabhupada's room after a conversation with Shruti Kitty and just offered my dandavats and Prabhupada said, "So don't be irresponsible, Prince." And I can't remember, I don't think I said sorry, but I just, Prabhupada could see that I was devastated. You know, I was tossed out. I was temple president of Sydney, you know, manager of Spiritual Sky and, you know, and in charge of this expedition. And so I was totally, you know, devastated indeed. And he said, just, we don't need irresponsible prince. To enjoy, or Krishna sends and you simply enjoy.
You know, after the initiation ceremony, we were asked to go and get dakshin, and none of us really actually understood what that meant, but we were told that you just went and begged. So we went along the street, you know, and begged, and just said, you know, which was quite ludicrous in, you know, in St Kilda, which was a very seedy part of town, and, you know, and we just said, I've been initiated by my spiritual master, can you please give something? So I got a bowl and a few items and things. So it was because it had been the installation of the deities, there was a huge feast, and I was to take the dakshin up to Srila Prabhupada. So it was after the feast, everyone was very jovial, and Srila Prabhupada was sitting, and I had made Prabhupada a gift, and Prabhupada was sitting on the cushions, and he was just sitting relaxed with this huge smile on his face. And I walked in and paid obeisance, and he goes, so what have you brought me? And I said, oh, just a little something, Srila Prabhupada. And I handed him a bowl which I'd collected in dakshin, and he went and he leant over the desk and he pulled the bowl towards him. He goes, so what have you given me? And I said, oh, just a little something. And it was an orange. He goes, oh, it is an orange. And he took everything, all the items of the bowl, he actually took out one by one. And he goes, oh, an orange. And he put the orange on the desk. And then he goes, some flowers. Oh, very nice. And put the flowers on the desk. And then he got the Lakshmi, and it was 80 cents, which was just ridiculous. And he counted this. And he went one, and it was like 4 20-cent pieces. And he goes, ah, Lakshmi, very nice. But fortunately, not knowing, you know, we were so ignorant at the time. And so what I'd done, I'd actually made Srila Prabhupada a cartel bag, and it was all beaded for his cartels. And he goes, what is this? I said, it's for your cartels, Prabhupada. And he loved it. He goes, oh, look, this is wonderful. And he goes, Shriti Kitty Balimadan, come see what she has made me. And he brought them in to show this cartel bag. So after that, he just talked a little bit more about my service as, you know, Didi Pujari, looking after Krishna nicely. And then he just gave me a huge laglu. And I walked out with the laglu in my hand, and Shriti Kitty and Bali Madan were all laughing and in the other room, and said, you cannot open, Prabhupada says that you can't enter the spiritual world unless you like laglus. So that was my initiation. That was the end of that particular day.
When I met the devotees, they invited me to the Sunday feast in Sydney, because they didn't have a temple in Brisbane, they were just travelling. So then I went to the temple. I went north first, and then on my way back I dropped in Sydney because I was on my way home. I lived in South Australia, Mount Gambier, and I was on my way home, and I was planning on, you know, finishing my apprenticeship and marrying my childhood sweetheart. I thought, you know, I'd seen enough of Australia, I've seen enough, and I just want to go back and become settled now. So when I went to the Sunday feast, I saw the deities, and I had the prasadam, and I stayed there for a week, at least a week. And I decided, well, you know, I really should stay here. And the devotees were telling me, oh, you know, you should stay. You're a devotee, you should stay. So I said, okay, I'm going to go home, tell my parents, and then I'm going to come back. And they said, oh, no, you shouldn't leave. You should stay. I said, look, I have to say goodbye to my mother, because this is a long-term, you know, commitment. So I went back, and my mother said to me, she said, well, my mother's a very strict Catholic. She would chant rosaries 2 hours a day, and same with my grandparents. So I came from that sort of background. And so she said, look, I want to read some of your books. I want to see what you're actually doing. I said, fine. I mean, my father, he thought I was stupid. But my mother, she wanted to know what I was doing. So I said, okay. So when I went back, I posted her some books, and then she read the books, and she wrote me a letter, and she said, I'm very happy that you're following religious principles, and I hope and pray that one day you'll come back to the Catholic Church. So that was great. Anyway, I had my mother's blessings, basically. So I joined the temple there, and then within, it was about a year. Well, no, it was only 6 months later, because I joined in 1970, I think. And Prabhupada came in 71 to the Sydney Temple in Glebe. And so you know, we were painting and decorating the temple for Prabhupada. We basically revamped the whole temple, repainted it and fixed this up, and you know, and so there was still some work to be done. So they asked me and I think 2 other devotees, can you please stay back and finish that off? We're going to pick up Prabhupada, right? And I thought, oh, okay. So I did that, and then I was at the front of the house, and I think I was painting, and then Prabhupada came through the gate because there was a fence, bushes, so you couldn't see actually the footpath. So all of a sudden the gate opened and Prabhupada was walking through, and I turned around and I saw Prabhupada. So I paid my obeisance immediately, but what struck me was how effulgent Prabhupada looked. He looked like there was a sun inside Prabhupada. And I've never experienced that before. And but when I first saw Prabhupada, it was like, you know, it was like my father, my grandfather, my king, my everything, all at once there, you know, walking up the pathway towards the front door.
I think it was 1975 during the Gopurnim festival, and Madhavisa had invited all the Sankirtan devotees up to see Srila Prabhupada. So I was standing on the roof of the temple, and I saw Srila Prabhupada walking on the roof, and Prabhupada, the way he walked, he looked very, very angelic. And then I went into his room and I called out, Jai Srila Prabhupada, and I paid my obeisances. And then I felt Srila Prabhupada walk past me, and then when I hopped up from my obeisances, Prabhupada was sitting in his seat. And then Madhavisa Swami was introducing each devotee to Srila Prabhupada. He would say, this is Jayadharma. He distributes your books, Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada would give an affirmation, a nod, and smile at the devotee. And then he introduced myself, as this is Adi Purusa. He also distributes your books, Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada began to chant, Govindam Adi Purusham, Tamaham Bhajami. So like previously when I got initiated, I didn't like my name, because someone said that that's a difficult name to have. So I was very mental about my name. And I was thinking all about my name when I was in the room. And so Prabhupada chanting my name made me feel that my name is wonderful. And so I was very happy after that, and I didn't have any mental anxiety about my name. And the devotees, one devotee said, oh, why did Prabhupada give you so much attention? And I said, oh, because I don't know, because Prabhupada's Prabhupada, you know, he knows everything. And he knew that I didn't like my name, so to encourage me, he chanted Govindam Adi Purusham.
I joined with quite a few devotees. We were all hippies, living as hippies. And we were in Sydney, and Jayadharma and Sanak saw a picture on the wall of Radha and Krishna. And it was the first temple in Sydney. Vaibhavi had done the beautiful painting of Radha and Krishna. So they went inside, they saw Lord Jagannath inside, and they came home and said, we just saw this most amazing guy, you know, and really unusual. And so we were all going to Melbourne, and they said, we'll give you the address of the temple in Melbourne. So we went and visited the temple. Pendra and Upananda were there. They'd just opened the temple in Sydney, or they'd just started preaching in Sydney, and then they'd just gone to Melbourne. So we all went to Melbourne, and we stayed. We wanted to join. They didn't have enough room, so the boys had to go out and find the first temple, big temple, where Radha and Krishna actually came, and Prabhupada came to that temple. And yes, so we all joined. Previous to that, I wasn't in a very good state because I'd actually had a Kundalini explosion from taking too much LSD and marijuana. And we wanted, like Haygreaver, we wanted to stay high forever because what was there to come down to? So on that note, I was pretty out of it when we all joined. I had a little boy. My son was only 8 months old, and I'd already blown my mind. So I was in a pretty strange state. I just went along with it, started chanting and never stopped. Prabhupada just imparted to me that I keep chanting, that if I just keep chanting, I'll be all right. I mean, I touched his feet at this time, he did the big fire yagya there. And then as he was walking, we all dived at his feet and touched his feet. And that night I had a dream. I was like Lord Brahma touching Krishna's feet, and that was really nice. And from that visit, I got his blankets and his sheets and things like that, all his bedding. And so I've always taken his instruction rather than thinking. I always didn't think he would know who I was, from a bar of soap kind of thing. So I never had any of that. Like Jayadharma was right up there, and she'd been an actress and she'd been this and that. So Prabhupada was using that to promote the movement. Here's this actress earning millions of dollars and she's joined the Hare Krishna movement. So that was really good. But I wasn't kind of in that category. I was more behind the scenes always.
So I was born in Australia, but strangely enough, I didn't learn how to speak English until I was 7 years old because my parents and the whole community of people around me were Lithuanians that come after the war to help bolster the workforce in Australia, which was rather depleted after 2 world wars. So I spoke Lithuanian rather fluently. And then when I come into contact with some of the books that were written by Srila Prabhupada, I noticed that there was a lot of Sanskrit in those books. So when I was there in Melbourne on the first day Prabhupada had a darshan, I took that opportunity to go there, put my hand up and asked Srila Prabhupada, I've heard that the Lithuanians are a part of the Aryan race. Can you tell me something about this? And then when Srila Prabhupada, when Madhavisa Swami explained that question to him, he didn't get it first time. Maybe it was my accent or whatever, but he said very forcefully, he said that the devotees, they're the best of they're the Aryan race. Those devotees who serve Krishna are Aryans, and then Arjuna was the best of Aryans, therefore he's the best of all, best devotees, best of all Aryans. Then the next morning, when Srila Prabhupada delivered the Bhagavatam class, at the beginning, he said that Sukadeva Goswami, he gave this Bhagavatam to Parikshit Maharaj. At that time, Parikshit Maharaj was in charge of the whole world, and he was the king of the Aryan race, the Aryas. You devotees are also Aryans because you're Indo-European stock, and Maharaj Parikshit's grandson, Maharaj Tejasi, he had 2 sons, and he awarded Eastern Europe those sons, and that is stated in Mahabharata. To me, that was clear. That was the answer that I was looking for, and that's a very, very significant, prolific answer, not only for Lithuanians, but the Ukrainians, the Latvians, the Belarusians, and the Russians, because there is so much Sanskrit scattered through all those languages that we can understand where our roots come from.
Well, the next day I downed a wig and I went through Perth opening up incense accounts while we were there. So when I got back in the afternoon for lunch, Shruti Kirti told Prabhupada his Jayadharma has been out selling incense. And he said, Jay, Jay. So that was good, and that I wasn't, but it was quite an experience. You can imagine Prabhupada saying, this movement doesn't need you. So Prabhupada didn't like devotees to exploit the resources sent by Krishna. So then we flew across to Melbourne, and Prabhupada was opening the Melbourne temple. But if I can just digress a little bit, it seemed to be kind of my relationship with Prabhupada. Because when I was in Sydney earlier, I had become a little proud, but I'll even digress a bit further, is that we were doing Sankirtan in the very early days, about 1971, 72, and the authorities were putting us into jail. So Madhavisa Maharaj had written to Prabhupada, and he'd written to Prabhupada, Prabhupada, we need to borrow money. And if we could only raise some money, we would get legal representation, and we would beat the police and the council. We would beat them. Prabhupada wrote back and said, no need of lawyer, no need of legal counsel, just chant Hare Krishna and go to jail. He said, you can chant in the temple, you can chant in the street, and you can chant in jail. Just chant. And so Madhavisa, who was very beloved devotee in GBC of Australia, he gave us the message. Chant in the temple, chant in the street, chant in jail. So everybody would go on Sankirtan, even the spiritual sky people. And so we were getting thousands of summons, and there was a big court case, and the police would arrive at the temple and they'd have 200 summonses, and whoever answered the door would say, they're not here, they're not here, they're not here. Anyway, there was a big court case, and we didn't go. We didn't even go, because Prabhupada said, just chant. So it was front page of the newspapers. Hare Krishna's sanctioned by court to chant on the street. So in other words, it went to court, and we didn't even represent ourselves, and it came up that that the judge said, you can't stop them from chanting, but there's one thing I will say, is they must keep moving. They can't congest the streets. So therefore it was past the court.
So the next day, because I was now in charge of Srila Prabhupada's room, which I actually was in charge of every time he came to Melbourne, but this was my first experience of being in charge of Srila Prabhupada's room. I had made the asana cushions and helped with the Vyasasana cushions, but so I was doing the room. I was, we had, in those days, we had to change the asana cushions every day. We used to put white sheets down on the floor. And it was a bit of a production, and I was also in charge of Srila Prabhupada's washing every time he came. So, but I was just about, about half an hour off finishing. I still was, putting the asana cushions on, and I just finished doing that and picking up a few things, and all of a sudden they said, Srila Prabhupada's back from the morning walk. And I went, oh my gosh, he's back. I didn't know what to do. So I just grabbed everything, tried to finish up cleaning, and I came racing out of the room. Well, in Melbourne, there were 3 stairs that went up to Prabhupada's room. And onto the left of those, onto the right of the stairs, was a door which used to be the Brahmacharini ashram. So Prabhupada came up the stairs, and I came racing out of the room, and I had buckets and mops and everything in my hand. And I looked at Srila Prabhupada, and I thought, what do I do? How do I pay my obeisances? I don't know what to do. And then I looked at him, I looked at the mop and the broom, then I looked at the door, and then I looked at Prabhupada again. I looked at the mop and the broom again, and then I looked at the door, and I just went, and I just sideways flew into the door and closed the door and thought, oh, he didn't see me. So I just sat inside waiting for Prabhupada to pass. Well, all of a sudden, the door came open. The door slowly came open, and Srila Prabhupada walked in, and he said, so, Hare Krishna. I said, yes, Srila Prabhupada. He goes, so, you are cleaning room? And I said, yes, Prabhupada. And he goes, ah, very nice. He goes, so I have tricked you today. I said, yes, Prabhupada. He goes, ah. And he goes, but I said, but I think I was finished cleaning. And he goes, ah, very nice, Hare Krishna. I mean, so grateful, so gracious, but at the same time quite playful. He was, I was very young, you know, I think I'd just gone 16. He was very playful, like 15, 16. So he was very playful with me in that regard. And so that was the second instance I had with Prabhupada.
So then Prabhupada came to the Asan, Vyasasan, and he gave a lecture, a talk about Krishna consciousness, which was fairly basic. And there was one man in the audience, and he said, because you know, like we were reading Prabhupada's books, and almost every page Prabhupada was bashing Mayavadis, you know, and so we thought Mayavadis were a joke, you know, they're stupid people and they're a joke. This was our attitude that developed, and this came from reading Prabhupada's books. So one of the people that came, he wasn't a devotee, and it was the first time that we'd seen him at the temple, but he came to see Prabhupada. And so he said to Prabhupada, he was saying how it's all one, and Prabhupada said something, I can't remember what it was, but he found something objectionable to that. So he said basically we are all one, and he was trying to discredit the personal aspect that Prabhupada was giving of God. And we all burst out laughing. You know, the whole temple, we just burst out, Mayavadi, a real live one, right here. And then Prabhupada told us, no, you know. And so then Prabhupada explained to him about the personal aspect of God. And he was happy with that. And then one of my godbrothers, he ran into him some years ago. This is a long time after Prabhupada left. And he was telling my godbrother what fond memories he had of Prabhupada, and how Prabhupada was so affectionate in his dealings with him, and he always remembers that, you know. So, you know, Prabhupada melted his heart, even though he's a Mayavadi.
You know, in the early days, Burujana and Jayadharma were living on the outside, and everyone thought if you're living on the outside, you're a demon. But that was in the really early days. You know, you can understand we're all just hippies, and you know, coming into this, you know, amazing new culture that we're a part of. But I was living on the outside. I'd been away, separated from devotees. But I heard that there was volume 1 and 2 of Krishna book. Right, my brother had committed suicide. He's similar to me, you know, big issues with the father and everything. And so I knew I was going down the same track. Okay, I'm losing it in the head. My mind is getting too strong for me. I can't withstand it. And somehow, I don't know who told me, but you could get, you know, my daughter had this little carry around tape deck. And so I raided her bank account, got $178, and bought these two sets of Prabhupada's, you know, Srimad Bhagavatam, the Krishna Volume Book 1 and 2. And from that day, I listened continuously, 24/7, of Prabhupada's pastimes, you know, Krishna's pastimes. And that was the beginning of coming up. I would have died there, but I just came up and up and up, and yeah. Everyone knows, if they know me, they know she's always got a tape deck, you know, or she's always listening, you know. So, yeah, that saved my life, hearing about Krishna's pastimes.
When I was in the Melbourne temple, Prabhupada was arriving and I was late. And I was running down the stairs and I ran round the corner, almost ran into Srila Prabhupada. And the potency that I felt, the spiritual potency, was so indescribable that it completely liberated me, and I immediately paid my obeisances, and I had this like not your body experience immediately, and I could understand that Srila Prabhupada is my eternal guru. He's like, you know, he's carrying Krishna in his heart. He has the full potency of Krishna, and I'd like to surrender my whole life to him.
So Prabhupada arrived in Glebe, and we had a little abode for him next to the temple, which we just acquired, because we could rent more now because we had more money. And Madhavisa Maharaj introduced me to Prabhupada as the head of Spiritual Sky and the head of the business of the temple, and very successful. And he's got thousands of dollars, and here's a check for $20,000. And Prabhupada looked at me, and he looked at the check, and he handed it to his secretary. And I said to Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada, I have a gift for you, some sandalwood oil. And I pushed it across to him, and he opened it up, and he said, so you're the head of our Spiritual Sky, and you don't even know good sandalwood oil. He said, he pushed the oil back to me, he said, you don't even know a pure oil, and you're head of our business section. It seemed to be my Leela. And I said, yes, Prabhupada, I guess I don't know a pure oil. And he said, well, go. Prabhupada just instructed, he was just flabbergasted that such a person as useless as myself was in charge of the fragrance company of the movement.
So then Prabhupada gave initiations, Harinam initiations, and so I wanted to take Harinam. So the temple president said, yeah, okay, you can take Harinam. So we're all sitting there. The women were on the left side of Prabhupada, and the men were on the right side, and we're at the back. I mean, that temple, it was a regular Sydney house, a wooden house, and it had a huge backyard. It would have been probably half an acre, or sorry, not half. Maybe the whole block would be close to a quarter of an acre, and so we had this huge area at the back. So we did a yagya there, and the temple. We all had temple names, and so Prabhupada had a list of all the names of the devotees, and he had the temple name of each devotee. So when a devotee would come up to get his initiation, Prabhupada would generally give him that temple name. And so one after the other, and then I was at the end. I thought I'd be, but no, then they went on to the women, and the women were taking initiation. And I was thinking, I mustn't be on the list. If I was on the list, Prabhupada would have called me by now, because the women are going. So I thought, okay, I'm going to have to take this into my own hands. And I decided, okay, when the last woman goes up for initiation, I will stand up and I will ask Prabhupada for initiation. So then the last woman came up, and so I stood up, and Prabhupada looked at me, and it's as if he knew, what happened and that I wanted initiation. So he said, come. So he came over to me, and the temple president at the time was a GBC actually. He had the list. What was the GBC's name now? He just died some time ago. So anyway, he said, because my temple name was Sukadev. So he said, this is Sukadev. And Prabhupada said, no, this is Sahadeva. So he gave me initiation, gave me that name, Sahadeva, at that time. And so I was so happy to get initiation, but I was so stressed. I'm not going to get initiation. I thought, no, this can't happen. I have to take initiation. Because I accepted Prabhupada as my guru, like from within my heart. Really the first time I ever saw Prabhupada, that was it. And so I had to take initiation, and I didn't want to wait either. So I was lucky, and Prabhupada accepted me as his disciple and gave me that name, so I was so happy.
So when we're flying back from Perth, we flew in the same aeroplane as Prabhupada, which was really blissful. And so I had a chance to have a bit of a yarn to Prabhupada, just myself and Srila Prabhupada. And I had a terrible stutter in those days. I used to stutter quite a bit when I was younger, just due to nerves and trauma or whatever. And so I was sitting next to Prabhupada at the airport, because Prabhupada always liked to get early. And I said to Prabhupada, Prabhupada, the devotees in the temple, if you chant with these fingers, they say no, these fingers, that finger, these fingers. Which fingers should you chant with? And Prabhupada looked at me, and I'm holding up all my fingers, and he said to me, just chant, just chant. At that time I felt very foolish, but it showed Prabhupada's merciful glance, is that just chant. So then I realised if you had no hands, you might have to chant with your feet. But somehow or other, just chant. Just chant. Just don't get too much into the technicalities of it all.
I'd gone to get him a hat, and it was cold, it was Melbourne, it was cold, and I went everywhere to try and find a particular hat for him, but I could only find yellow wool. And it's in many pictures in San Francisco, Yatra, he had it on. There's many pictures of him with this hat on, but I couldn't, and I didn't know what to do. So it was Vijayaranya and I, who was temple president in New Zealand. I'd been sent to New Zealand just for a few months to be, well, it was actually about a year, to be Pujari after everyone had left. So that's another whole story. But so we'd gone upstairs to give Prabhupada the hat. And Prabhupada came in, he asked a little bit about how we were going with the Yatra and the Yatra there. And I was still doing Prabhupada's room, so he was seeing me in the daytime every morning anyhow, but just saying Hare Krishna and things. So I'd walked in, he goes, so what have you got? And I said, oh, it's just a little gift, it's very cold, Prabhupada, you might like this hat. So he went, oh, this is very nice. So Prabhupada took the hat, and you know, in India they sometimes put the hats like straight up. So he took it by the pom-pom, and he just put it on his head, but it was sitting about like this high. It was like sitting about a foot above his head. And I just kept looking at it thinking, it's sort of not really the way to go. And Prabhupada's going, this is nice? I said, yes, Srila Prabhupada. And he goes, yes. And I go, is this how you wear? He goes, and I go, well, Srila Prabhupada, you sort of bring it down like this. And so Prabhupada started bringing it down, and he rolled it over. And he goes, like this? I said, yes, Prabhupada, that would be very nice like that. And so he was sort of, again, very gracious, very humble, but joyful, and just sort of allowing us to sort of, in a way, instruct him. Was sort of like, I didn't know whether to say anything because, you know, that it was like ridiculous. It was sitting up here high. So I didn't know what to say, and I thought, should I say something? Because it you know, it's not going to be good in public. You're going to look like a madman. But anyway, so he brought it down, and he just liked it when I did it like this. So whenever you see him, he's got the hat and it's sort of rolled down. There's many pictures of him with that particular hat on. So he was just, again, showing how friendly he could be, how sweet he could be, but at the same time, almost childlike, that, you know, letting us sort of take care of him in that regard, that sort of, you know, not... you know, like a father would let the child put on their slippers the wrong way or something like that. That was really special.
So we flew through to Melbourne, which was spectacular. Prabhupada loved the samosas on the aeroplane. He ate many samosas, and I was lucky enough to eat the remnants. But the most spectacular feeling was when we reached Melbourne and the door of the aeroplane opened, and you could hear the chanting waft into the aeroplane. And there was 100 or 200 devotees waiting there in the lounge to receive Prabhupada. And there was tumultuous, joyous chanting. And it was absolutely a spontaneous, beautiful occasion, and just heart-wrenching to walk through that and see the devotees welcome Prabhupada with such gusto and enthusiasm. And then we went down to the press where Prabhupada was being welcomed by the press of Australia. And so a funny thing happened is we'd rented a Rolls Royce for Srila Prabhupada, or a Bentley, and which was a big thing in Australia, and actually it had got a parking ticket. They'd given it a parking ticket because, of course, the devotees parked it right, in the most conspicuous position. And the press cottoned on to that, and they said, "Swami, you're a spiritual man." Prabhupada looked over and said, "But you're not materialist." Prabhupada looked, and they said, "But your followers have got you a Rolls Royce." And Prabhupada turned and said, "I'm a man of God. Bring me car of diamonds. What is this tinny Rolls Royce?" In the uproar of devotees. Some of this might be on video, but it was a tremendous moment, the uproar of all the devotees and the smile on the... So the newspapers in Australia at that time said, "Swami says, bring me car made of diamonds." Which just showed how Prabhupada was in an inconceivable space that no one could fathom his wonderful answers.
In Melbourne, when Prabhupada was there in, was it 73, 74? I used to go on the morning walks with Prabhupada. And so one morning walk, I'd just been, this is after Chaitanya Charitamrita had been published, so I can't remember what year that was. But I remember reading when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would walk, then there was huge holes in the ground where his foot would step. So, because the devotees were getting dust from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's feet. So I thought, well, I should get some dust from Prabhupada's feet. So I thought, okay. So, and it had been sort of raining or drizzling during the night, so the grass that we were walking on was a little moist, so you could see the foot imprints of the devotees as they were walking. And I didn't even have a bag with me, so disorganized. But I thought, I'm going to grab a handful. So I got, Deepak was on the right, and the GBC, what's his name? He was on the left, and I got right behind Prabhupada, and I leant down, and I thought, okay, I'm going to take a handful from this step as Prabhupada's foot was coming up. And as Prabhupada's foot came up, there's no imprint. And I thought, huh? No imprint? And then I looked at both sides. I could see Deepak's and the GBC's imprint really clearly in the mud. And I thought, well, something wrong here, right? I'll try again. So again, Prabhupada's foot lifted up, and there's no imprint. Prabhupada was not leaving an imprint. And I was looking step after step. Prabhupada was not leaving an imprint. So I thought, well, I aborted that mission. I thought, well, should I or shouldn't I? I thought, nah. So I didn't do that. And then, one offering, because every year, there Prabhupada's Vyasa Puj, there'd be a book that would come out from offering from devotees. So there was one devotee lady in the States. She had a similar experience on a morning walk going in long grass. she didn't see Prabhupada's footprint on the grass. Because, you know, when you step on the grass temporarily, the grass will go down. It didn't go down. So that backed, you know, I wasn't having a flashback on drugs or anything. It was real, you know, because I was a little confused.
And in the Rath Yatra, Prabhupada was walking along, as Prabhupada always did, very humble yet firmly fixed in the absolute truth. So during the festival, there was a huge crowd around Prabhupada. You know, we had 3 huge Rath Yatra carts. Madhavisa never did anything in a small way for Srila Prabhupada. The Melbourne temple was spectacular. Prabhupada loved it. And the 100-year-old monk's house or priest's house was all done up to perfection. So Prabhupada's walking in the Rath Yatra and there's a huge crowd, and there's 3 or 4, you know, there's a lot of suspicious looking ruffians around Prabhupada, you know, and they're closing in. And I was playing mridanga, and Madhavisa was playing kartals, a few other devotees were playing mridanga. So Madhavisa, as he was dancing in a circle, and as he was twirling, he was kicking, kicking these people, kicking them quite hard and quite firmly to say, get back from Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada just kept on walking, total faith in Prabhupada. I'm seeing Madhavisa, you know, almost brutally, you know, just giving them a firm kick to say, don't come anywhere near His Divine Grace. And His Divine Grace is, you know how he would float. You know, not walk, just kind of float along in this huge crowd. It was a massive crowd in the main street of. So then there's a huge lecture at Melbourne Town Hall. Quite a good crowd. And actually, my mother was there. She still remembers today. And so the devotees had made a fan. And I always liked to fan Prabhupada in Vrindavan or, you know, wherever I could. I was always first to grab a fan and get by the Vyasasana and fan Srila Prabhupada. But the devotees in their artistic fever had got a piece of chipboard. You know how heavy chipboard is, don't you? It's really heavy. You know, kilos. And they'd about so big, and they'd put a huge pole on it, and they'd stuck peacock feathers on it. So I picked up that fan and I started to fan Prabhupada. And somehow or other, the air conditioning in the place didn't work, and it was really hot. Some say it was sabotaged by the City Council, because Madhavisa rented the Melbourne Town Hall. And it was a good crowd too. And he was a great preacher, Madhavisa. And so I was fanning Prabhupada. This is after Perth. This is after the don't know sandalwood oil. I'm fanning Prabhupada. And Prabhupada's playing the lecture. He's giving the lecture. It's a fabulous lecture. Fabulous lecture. Every lecture of Prabhupada was fabulous. And he's saying that if you want knowledge, don't just stick your head in the ocean to find out how many fish there are. You might find a shark or a crocodile, but go to the Vedas. And the Vedas tell you there's 900,000 species within the water. If you want knowledge, go to the Vedas. Well, I'm fanning Prabhupada. I'm starting to ache. It was a huge kirtan. Huge kirtan. Prabhupada speaking for 56 minutes. Every bone in my body is aching. My head is aching. My wrists are aching. My legs are aching. I'm just about ready to collapse. I'm trying to nod to all the devotees who are just like either asleep because they haven't slept for a week, or in ecstasy, or both. And I'm nodding. You know, please, somebody perceive what's going on, will you? Somebody come, and I just can't get anyone's attention. So I stop fanning. Prabhupada stops the lecture and looks at me. And says, fan, fan. And it would have been the greatest moment of my life, because I just picked up the fan and I fanned for the rest of the lecture and the rest of a big kirtan. And it was just, where you just forgot, you know, all your pain. And in the years of service, there was no shortage of it, you know, of pain, which, if you really take a good look at it, could even be pleasure. So it was a transcendental moment.
So I had got to go on this particular morning walk, and it was a very cold morning in the Botanical Gardens, and we were, you know, everyone always went right behind Srila Prabhupada. So we were following, and my godbrother was right next to me, following right behind Srila Prabhupada, and I was right next to him. We were right behind Prabhupada. And we were walking, and it was very misty, and Prabhupada was speaking, and of course everyone wants to huddle around to hear. But at this particular time, my godbrother stood on Prabhupada's foot, and the back of his shoe, and Srila Prabhupada stopped, and he turned and he looked around, and we just went, oh gosh, you know, get back, get back. So then Prabhupada walked again, and we were walking a little bit further, and my godbrother stood on Prabhupada's shoe again. And Srila Prabhupada turned, and he looked, and he stopped for a bit longer and looked at him. And, you know, we said, come back, come back. So we continued on. Anyway, he kept walking and walking, and he did it again. He stood on Prabhupada's shoe again. Well, this time Srila Prabhupada turned around, and he got his cane, and he just whacked him firmly across the arm. And we all just jumped, and we were all so terrified to go any further at that point. We all went back about 10 feet from the distance after that. Prabhupada didn't say anything. He just whacked him with the cane. And we all realized that, you know, he will be, again, like he's saying, merciful, but, you know, you can have a few mistakes, but you're going to get it the third time round. And that was pretty much one of the stories. So that was a thing that was one of my favorite things with Prabhupada. And Prabhupada's face, he wasn't smiling, he just was very nonchalant again, just whack. And that was one wonderful story.
Sri Cekitana, he was Prabhupada's servant at the time. And so he wanted to, he was really busy, and he wanted some extra time. So he asked me, well, he asked the temple president, you know, is there anyone that can cook? And they said, oh, Sahadeva, he's good. So he asked me, I said, yeah, I'd love to cook for Prabhupada. So Prabhupada had this 3 or 4 tier, it's like a tiffin. And hang on, was a 1, 2, no, it was a 4 tier. And the bottom tier was dal, and then it had the next tiffin that fitted on that had holes in it, so that the steam could come through from the dal, and we put rice in there. And then the one on top of that also had holes. We had vegetables, and then one on top of that some other vegetables. So I was making 2 sabjis, 1 rice, and the dal. And so Sri Cekitana, he showed me how to do that. And it was really simple, quick. And Prabhupada was eating very simply at that time. And I think it's because of Prabhupada's health at the time. And so he showed me how to make the chaunts for the dal. He showed me how to make the chaunts for the 2 separate chaunts for 2 separate sabjis. So he showed me how to do that. So I would do that every morning for Prabhupada's lunch. And you know, one thing I should mention, like in Melbourne, Prabhupada was on the top floor, and his bedroom was there. And so why I can't remember the GBC's name. I mean, you know. But anyway, the GBC had appointed, because the stairs go up, there's a landing, and then stairs go up again to another landing, which you enter Prabhupada's room. And so he put one devotee at the bottom, one devotee at the landing, and one devotee at the front of Prabhupada's bedroom door. There's no way anyone could get in to see Prabhupada, you know. No, you couldn't get there. So I thought, well, you know, this is my chance, you know. I'll be able to get into Prabhupada's room. Same thing with me. You know? I actually got to the landing just outside Prabhupada's door. And so Shruti Kirti, he would come out and bring it in. But I saw Prabhupada, he was right through the doorway, and I paid my obeisances. And just Prabhupada's mood, it was like, you know, he was like a loving, affectionate father that gave, you know, and really that love that Prabhupada had was millions of times greater than parents or friends or children or anyone else in this world. It's incomparable, that love and affection. And it was by that love and affection that I felt from Prabhupada that basically centered me in Krishna consciousness for my whole life. Even though I might not have been following properly at different times in my life, but still, I always knew I'm a devotee, I'm a disciple of Prabhupada, and you know, I will always try and follow. And that was because of that love and affection that Prabhupada showed to me. And also to Shruti Kirti and other of his disciples, I saw how affectionate Prabhupada was. And I think that affection, I mean, you know, like a pure devotee, he can do anything. So what he can reveal to one person, he can contain from another person, right? But Prabhupada, especially, he showed me that love and affection that he had. And I experienced that when I was cooking for Prabhupada. I was doing personal service. And I remember while I was doing that personal service, I was doing service for Prabhupada anyway, within the temple as a pujari from 4 o'clock in the morning until 10 o'clock at night. And I did that for 16 years within ISKCON. And so I was already serving Prabhupada. And so from that service, I was enlivened. And when I would attend a Bhagavatam class, a Bhagavad Gita class, or I would read Chaitanya Charitamrita or Bhagavatam or any of Prabhupada's books, I was so riveted and I was so inspired and it was so enthusing. And I know that was because I was serving Prabhupada. If I wasn't, and I saw so many devotees would come, get initiated, they wouldn't join the temple, and they're living outside. They didn't have the same impetus, the same momentum, the same enthusiasm, you know. I'm not saying all, but a lot of them. But those who served Prabhupada genuinely and gave their heart to Prabhupada and served him, you could see they were blessed by Prabhupada in different ways. There's one of my god sisters, she's not following now, but anytime she leads a kirtan, there's tears flowing from her eyes. And her kirtans are so sweet, like from Braj.
The lecture's going on after that, and I'm fanning Prabhupada during question time. So there was a guy in Melbourne called the Wizard, and he grabs the microphone and he starts yelling at Prabhupada. So, he says, show me God. Prabhupada says, have you got the eyes to see God? And he yells out, I am God. Prabhupada says, God is all beautiful? Are you all beautiful? And the man says, yes, and the entire audience bursts into laughter. Prabhupada says, God is all rich. Are you all rich? And he says, yes. Oh, he's a vagabond. He lives in the street. Everybody laughs. Prabhupada says, God is all strong. If I kick you in the face, will you defend? And at that point, two devotees picked up the wizard and gently took him from the theatre. So after the lecture, a number of people came to me and they showed their anger. And they said, who is he to say to you, fan me, fan me, fan me? I had about a dozen people around me. And then my mother, she butted in and said, it's good for him, it's good for him. He needs it, he needs it. And I said, well, if you take a spiritual teacher, you accepting an authority, you have analysed a person to have knowledge. You have analysed a person to be detached from the world. You have analysed a person with all good qualities, and you're learning from that person. And so that's the thing. If you accept a teacher, you have to be ready to take instructions. So that was kind of wonderful, and my mother still today adores Srila Prabhupada.
This particular day I'd been helping Shriti Kirti and the kitchen, and I used to help with making the milk sweets with prayer and everything. So Shriti said to me, why don't you take Prabhupada's lunch up? And so I thought, oh, I was a bit nervous about that idea, but of course you were going to do it anyhow. So I walked up, and as I was walking up, I could hear this banging on the desk, of a fist banging on the desk. And I sort of hesitated to knock on the door at this particular time. I could hear Srila Prabhupada yelling very vehemently. I won't particularly say what he was saying, to someone that was inside. So I wasn't sure, but anyway, I knocked gently on the door, and Srila Prabhupada says, come in. And so I opened the door, and Prabhupada immediately went into this very sweet, wonderful, gentle mood. He goes, Hare Krishna, prasadam, very nice, just put here. So I went and I put the prasadam there. And as I left the room, I looked at this particular friend that I had arranged. He'd been taken in by the schoolmaster, and, had absolutely wished I'd never arranged their meeting for him in any shape or form. And anyway, he went, as I went out, and Prabhupada was just so gentle and sweet with me and very kind. And then as I went and I closed the door, I could hear Prabhupada's fist going back on the door, onto the desk, yelling and yelling and yelling. And I just thought, oh my gosh, I mean, he's not really yelling, he's just chastising. He's chastising so they understand the seriousness of the situation, but he's not really, he's doing it with love, he's doing it with complete, an understanding for them, but also for them to understand how serious scriptural following is and how scriptural reference is. And so and with me, he was just, again, sweet and loving and very gentle. I wasn't in the hot seat, someone else was. So that was the situation. But it was very interesting to see how he just, immediately, the moment the door closed, he was back on banging on the desk and back to being his fiery self. Like, they always say that Prabhupada was like I think Radhanath Maharaj was saying he was like a thunderbolt or a soft rose, and he was being the thunderbolt. But, the moment I opened the door, he went to the rose and then went right back to the thunderbolt again. So it was very interesting to see. It was all for our benefit, not that he actually felt anger.
Well, it's on a morning walk in Perth, which has been recorded on audio. But Ganesh did say to Prabhupada, at one stage, maybe we could force people to become Krishna conscious. And Prabhupada said that's not possible because you can't force love. So love must be spontaneous. But there was an interesting moment which I don't think is captured on audio with Prabhupada walking in the beach in Perth, is because I've only been able to track down a few. But Prabhupada all of a sudden mentioned a funny thing. He mentioned that he had a godbrother who was 92, and that godbrother had married a young girl under 21. And Prabhupada was just mentioning it, and he was laughing in a very kind of childish way. It was very interesting to, it's hard to describe the laugh, but I always thought, gee, and, you know, that's really interesting, that, you know, Prabhupada thinks it's funny in a very innocent way that his godbrother, 92, you know, has married a girl under 21. But that was just interesting, you know, to hear that little laugh and of Prabhupada on a morning walk.
I cooked for Prabhupada for a week. It was the same lunch every day. I was cooking the dal, rice and 2 sabjis. And on the Ekadasi, Prabhupada asked for something special. He wanted these potato and tapioca rissoles. And so Srila Kirti gave me the recipe. He said, you just boil potatoes, and mash them, and while they're still hot, mash them. While they're still hot, you put the tapioca seeds and mix them with the hot mashed potatoes, and they'll swell. And then you roll them in little patties and deep fry them. And so Prabhupada had that. That was Prabhupada's, one of the things that Prabhupada had for Ekadasi. But I heard Prabhupada's, when Prabhupada was a kid, Prabhupada was called Kachuri Mukha, which is kachuri face, because Prabhupada loved kachuris. And kachuris are very difficult to digest. But Prabhupada could eat a lot of them. And I remember looking at Prabhupada's horoscope once, and Prabhupada had, I can't remember what he had in the 6th house, but it was, Prabhupada had very strong digestion. So he was able to eat a lot of kachuris.
So this particular time, I'd opened the front door and I'd forgot to give Prabhupada the flowers, and there was a wild kirtan going on. In Melbourne there's stairs that go up, there's about 10 stairs up, there's a small landing, and then there's another 10 stairs up. So the kirtan had gone and it was going on, and Guru Kripa had stopped Srila Prabhupada, asked him a question, and Prabhupada was on the top, just about 10 stairs up on the landing, and I was down the bottom of the stairs, and he turned and asked Prabhupada a question about something about his suitcase, and Srila Prabhupada, you know, answered him, and then he glanced down and saw me with these flowers at the bottom of the stairs, and Prabhupada walked back down the stairs to take the flowers out of my hand, and I just was like, I just about fell over, of course, and it was just, he was just so sweet, you know, the fact that I was there, I held, you know, I'd sort of got involved with the whole movement of him, but just that the fact that I was still willing to give some offering to him. Any offering that we did was special to him. Any small thing, it was just a little couple of flowers, you know, gardenias and jasmine and whatever, but he came down and grabbed them out of my hand and said, Hare Krishna, and sort of marched back up the stairs. And I just was sort of flabbergasted that he would be so sweet and so caring to worry about such a small, significant gift. And that was any small, significant gift that you gave, it was appreciated in magnitudes. And so that always was amazing to me.
A question I did ask Srila Prabhupada, which I don't think is recorded. I said to Prabhupada, I joined this Krishna conscious movement, Srila Prabhupada, because you said, chant and be happy. But I can't say that I'm really happy. You know, because Shruti Kirti was quite often asking Prabhupada's questions, and as we say in Australia, he was throwing the cat amongst the pigeons. So I thought, well, you know, there's hardship, you know what I mean? It's not all peaches and cream, it's not all be happy. You know, so I said to Prabhupada, I'm not really absolutely happy, Prabhupada. And I just was inquisitive to see what Prabhupada would say back. Because Prabhupada was also, even though he was like a thunderbolt, he was also like a rose. And I just thought, well, okay, Prabhupada, let's, I've had quite a bit of the thunderbolt. I'll check out the rose. And Srila Prabhupada, he said, well, if you didn't chant, you would be more unhappy. He says, your happiness must have keep working, you know. And that satisfied me, really, is that if you didn't chant, you'd be most unhappy. And of course, now in my life, 50 years later, I realise that's true, because the people that I'm meeting as an Ayurvedic practitioner, you could safely say no one finds true happiness in this material world through the elements, bhumi apana, through earth, water, fire, air and space, mind, intelligence and ego, the two inferior energies. People are not finding happiness in these places unless you chant Hare Krishna and come to the spiritual plane.
Well, there was another incident there that morning before Bhagavatam class that I went for a walk down the beach while I was waiting for Prabhupada to come, and I was just a couple of minutes late for greeting the deities. And then when I opened the big wooden doors in Melbourne Temple, Prabhupada was paying his obeisances to Lord Jagannath, which was the third set of deities. And when he paid his obeisances, it was only like 1 metre or so away from me, and I felt like my hair stood on end. It was such a electrifying experience. I really felt it. And then when Srila Prabhupada stood up, I just noticed his demeanour, that he wasn't a big man, but he was just so stately and serene and dignified that it was just a very extraordinary person. It was that. The other thing was that Prabhupada's forcefulness, that how did Prabhupada know that I was a devotee? I was thinking that he actually was an all-cognizant spiritual master. There was no doubt in my mind at that point in time, and that's what was with me for a number of years. That because my big doubt was that how could he have so many spiritual disciples and look after them all? But there was no question that, because that was just a misunderstanding of the philosophy, because Prabhupada was present also in his books, the Sadhu and the Shastra are non-different. So all that got rectified, and the road was clear as to what the path was. The path was clear of all obstacles there. So that was the result of that meeting with Prabhupada. I don't know if I had joined if I hadn't met him.
You know, and there was one letter I did receive from Srila Prabhupada, and I recommended a few devotees for initiation. They're still wonderful devotees, and the letter said that you give them initiation and perform a fire sacrifice, chant Hare Krishna, and you become a guru. That's what the letter said. So I can understand from that what Prabhupada's instructions, that, you know, to just follow the path of the Mahajans, and in that way, on whatever level, sincere level you're at, you could be a guru yourself, on not necessarily Uttama Adhikari, but. And there was one letter I got the other day from the Prabhupada archives, but there was a few Jayadharmas. Have you met other Jayadharmas? Oh, there was another Jayadharma, but there's one letter that Srila Prabhupada got, and he returned the reply to Jayadharma, and I'm just trying to remember if it was myself, you know, because and it was a letter complaining about the GBC.
Prabhupada or the Jayadharma?
No, from the Jayadharma. It could have been me, actually. It could have been me, because we did have, you know, incredible stories and upheavals, you know, which, you know, I think every body experienced, you know, over the years, you know, in the material world. But, you know, the essence is, of course, learning from these experiences. It's like medicine, being an Ayurvedic practitioner. You know, medicine takes extremely bad quite often. But if you know the qualities of that medicine, then your mind may even perceive it in a different way and know the good effects of the karma of that medicine. So it's like devotional service is a wonderful medicine. And if you take it without becoming a victim of the tricks of the mind, well, then you'll make advancement despite all the troubles. You know, all the troubles that you face, and, you know, and in the process, I think these are all a test of faith, actually. Not belief, but trust in the sublime. Belief is a different story. Belief is more on the emotional. Trust in the sublime is more philosophical, more on the spiritual plane. So, because we can see the sublime everywhere, you know, and especially Prabhupada came to teach us of the sublime, and that was his. So all the lessons, whether good or bad, are certainly transcendental.
So the fact that he's brave, that he's courageous, that he was willing to endure what he endured, and I could relate to that. You know, that you know, he's being able to do that, and giving us Mahabharata, showing us that the Pandavas could do that. You know, they can be rulers of the whole world, do the Rajasuya sacrifice, and then have it all taken away by Duryodhana and co. And just how they stayed strong. They stayed strong. They didn't deviate from Yudhisthira. And that's like our devotees didn't deviate from Prabhupada. And I haven't deviated from Prabhupada. And that's quite amazing, you know, that he's got that power to hold you, and, you know, whichever ashram you're in, you're steady and held. And then all of a sudden we're reaching 70 now. Since I turned 70, that was it. I just want to distribute Prabhupada's books now. And I'm unqualified. So I like those prayers, unqualified, you know, helpless, unable to do it. Who am I? Who, you know, totally not even, you know, I don't know Prabhupada's book, but, you know, you just, because he just did it, then you know we can do it. Yeah. That's it.
Prabhupada's quality of humility, and his quality of kindness, and his merciful smiles, everything about Prabhupada. I don't think there's one quality that you could say that's above any other quality. Prabhupada was perfect.
He was superior in every single way. I was just, the other thing we were just thinking about was, and his memory of what you have done and not done was actually quite instant. He had he understood who everybody was and what their place was, and he was well aware of every devotee. And this was sort of a bit poignant, as I thought was one of the last things I actually talked to Prabhupada or asked him about was in a lecture. And I'd been concerned. I was, you know, because I was doing so much service on the DD situation. I was chanting massively as well, but I wasn't getting a lot of time to read. And it was in class, and I said to Srila Prabhupada, you know, what's the most important, you know, hearing, reading, remembering, that whole shebang. And Prabhupada said to me, and he looked at me, and he goes, hearing. And it brought me right back to my first instruction of Prabhupada going, listen, when he was doing Gayatri, and I thought, oh my gosh, he was absolutely exactly what I was saying. He sort of brought it right back. I will remember that you weren't listening when you were taking Gayatri, but he brought it back. So he he just knew everything that was going on within you personally. He understood little, so it was like I was sort of being chastised that I wasn't listening again. But it was a very clear instruction. Hearing was the most important. But then I went on to understand that hearing's chanting, hearing's reading, hearing's everything, that association, it's all there in one word. And so I think with Prabhupada, it was actually his just eloquence with everybody. He could talk to anybody. He was, he could talk to the general, to a child, he could talk to a student, he could talk to a teacher. We saw him teaching, in Australia, the priests would come, we would see them go to the room and he would talk and we would go in and listen as Prabhupada would be explaining philosophy to them. And, so eloquently and so brilliantly, but with some compassion that also showed understanding of, it wasn't just understanding of Veda or Vedic, philosophy or, Krishna consciousness or whatever. He understood all religions and he could approach them in that particular way. I think that was one of the most astounding things. He knew how to actually answer any question and anybody, and saying even just to the reporter asking in the movie, the Hare Krishna movie, what is a hippie? I mean, perfect. Prabhupada was the perfection of one-liners, I think, as well. He just had such a sense of humour, but just it finished any misconception that you had. That one-liner could eradicate any doubt that you ever had.
Well, we were, one incident, this is in Melbourne again, in Prabhupada's room. He had, what did he have? There was a lawyer, there was 3 people. There was a lawyer, I think there was some government official, someone else. And so I was there in the room. I don't know how I got in there, but I got in there somehow or another. And so Prabhupada's talking. Madhavisa, he's the GBC. So Madhavisa was there. And there was a few other leading devotees that were in the room. And so Prabhupada was talking to them. And we used to, we used to make garlands for the deities every morning. So we weren't growing flowers, and we didn't have a lot of money, so we weren't buying flowers. So we used to go and steal flowers from the botanical gardens in Melbourne. And so we ended up getting caught. And it wasn't that long before that. It's just some months before that. And it was in the newspapers, and so the lawyer, he was working for us anyway. But he mentioned something about, I mean, there was a conversation going backwards and forwards, and sort of light conversation, and then that lawyer brought that up, right? And so then Prabhupada, not that Prabhupada got angry, but he got really serious at that point, and then he was explaining, how everything belongs to Krishna, and that a devotee who's serving Krishna is in the right place. And I can't remember whether Prabhupada quoted that verse where even if a devotee does something wrong, he's still rightly situated. I'm not sure about that. But then Prabhupada was explaining what the purpose of life is to, to develop Krishna Prem, to become free from bodily identification, and everything else in this world is a waste of time. Whatever money you have, whatever success you have in this world, it's just a total waste of time. So that lawyer was implying that devotees did something wrong. And so Prabhupada was saying, you're wasting your life. And I've seen Prabhupada protect these devotees before. Prabhupada loved his devotees so much. And any little even hint at a criticism to his devotees, Prabhupada became like a lion. So, that was something that really, really impressed me about Prabhupada, how much he loved his disciples, and that was nice.
Prabhupada's overall quality of being fixed a mixture of inconceivable mixture. If I could, being an Ayurvedic doctor, I would compare Srila Prabhupada to the perfect yogas or formulas made by, 600 BC, formulated by the greats of Ayurveda, Sushruta, Charaka and Vagbhat. In those formulas, you can't really pick the qualities, like in a sense, because all the qualities are so masterfully balanced. Like you've got formulas that are cooling with an after warming effect, with a beginning bitter taste with an after sweet taste. So I would compare Srila Prabhupada to inconceivable mixture of transcendental qualities that can't be described by the words good or bad, hot or cold, happy, distressed, just always transcendental, like above the mundane. Always you could trust that Srila Prabhupada would always be fixed in the absolute truth, Nitya, always. Always to give you relief, samsara dava nadalita loka. The spiritual master extinguishes the blazing fire of material existence with the rain of Krishna's mercy or the torchlight of knowledge. Amaganatimanandasya. So that's the quality of Prabhupada. And this material words of duality are just not enough to describe a transcendental personality.
Jayani